This review has been in the making for quite a while. I took my time because I really wanted to make sure I settled my thoughts on Valhalla, and I want to guarantee to everyone watching this video that this will be my 100% honest opinion, both as a gaming enthusiast as well as a longtime fan of the franchise. In this review, I'll touch on some very specific points like graphics, gameplay, and story. There will be spoilers in this review since the game has come out for quite some time now, and I feel like I need to touch on some spoilery points when I talk about the story. For every point, I'll try to make clear what I enjoyed or did not enjoy, but also trying to always leave some feedback for the dev team in a constructive way. By the way, let me remind you that I stream regularly on Twitch at twitch.tv/LocustSW. If you want to see some variety gaming with a heavy focus on the Assassin's Creed franchise, I'd love to see you around there. And if you're not subscribed yet, hey, hit that subscribe button, and without further ado, let's dive right in. Let's begin with the easy and the shortest one. This game is really beautiful. I really wasn't expecting the quality of the textures that we got and the amazing lighting. And you have to understand that I came off of Odyssey really disappointed. I mean, just watch this video, you'll understand. Gladly, the beauty of this game does not disappoint, and it truly shines in the photo mode. Valhalla was one of the first games that made me want to use the photo mode way more than I'm used to. But I do have some feedback for the team. There was a game that inspired this new direction of Assassin's Creed. That game came out 5 years ago, and it was called The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Back then, it blew my mind, not only because of the story, gameplay, and graphics, but because it built up an atmosphere like I've never seen any game do before, or even since then. You'd be walking through a forest or a mountain, and the ambient music just plays peacefully in your ears, while the strong winds amplify the movement and sound of the surrounding trees. It was truly a magical feeling. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, with its amazing graphical details, would benefit tremendously from this type of atmosphere. Peaceful ambient music doesn't play very often, sadly, and a lot of the flora just feels static. As an added note in this section, I would like to say that another point that requires a bit more love and attention are the cloth physics. Notice Geralt's cloak moves in a very satisfying way as he walks. And we all know how funny Eivor's cloak can be sometimes, so a bit more work on the cloth physics would be tremendously appreciated. The gameplay of Valhalla stays pretty close to Origins and Odyssey, with some exceptions. Gone are the question marks riddling the map. Now we have 3 categories of things to do. wealth marked in gold, mysteries in blue, and artifacts in white. In wealth, you can find new gear or new weapons or ability points or even resources to upgrade your resettlement. A lot of these elements even had some sort of environmental puzzle to solve in order to get the treasure, which is a welcome change since it makes it more rewarding finding stuff, but sometimes it's a bit overdone. In mysteries, you usually have world events, which function similarly to a short and sweet side quest or story. There's also some side boss fights to find and some cool subplots to uncover in this category. The big highlight of this category is obviously the Animus Anomalies, which are these very cool environmental parkour puzzles that connect to the modern day storyline and reminded me of the truth segments of the Ezio trilogy. On the other side of the spectrum you have the cairns, which really made me know pain I haven't known ever before. Ooh, we're getting there, alright. Right. Ooh. Seems good. Nah, fuck. Seems good. No. Seems good. No. Fuck! No! Why? Oh, come on. Artifacts are probably the ones I was less interested in. You have some things to collect to trade in at the settlement, as well as some cursed blip blobs to destroy. They weren't really my thing. And overall, you still had blips on the map to some extent, but the emphasis on exploration was there and I think it was great. If I had to give some feedback on this, I would say that the environmental puzzles need some work and some more thought put into them. Maybe some more variety. They sometimes were a bit cumbersome and not very rewarding. They felt very simple, but very repetitive along the 100 plus hours of gameplay players will have. Now, there's a lot of people that hate the new gear system. I like my Assassin's Creed with less RPG on it, so I really like the new system. Each weapon feels unique and has new aspects as you upgrade them. I feel actually rewarded when I find a new piece of gear instead of just massively hoarding 700 swords that look the same that range from level 10 to 100. And that brings me to another new thing. Gone now are the progression levels. Kinda. As you do stuff in the game, be it main quests or activities, you're gonna get rewarded with skill points to spend on the skill constellation. For each point spent, you increase your power level. Initially, I thought this was just to please the RPG crowd in having a number go up as you progress through the game, because the devs had stated that there would not be any level gating. But as soon as I started playing for a few hours, I noticed some areas had a higher power level, so the enemies were extremely hard to kill, and I realized that level gating was still present in the game, so the power level replaces the progression level, but it functions in a very similar way. As the game was built to be a successor of Origins and Odyssey in the very much Witcher-style RPG, I don't see any problem with this change, and the level gating didn't feel as bad as the previous games because the balancing was better and the side activities were more fun to do and allowed you to level up faster. The combat system in Valhalla is very different to anything done previously. It feels heavier and it's definitely more gruesome, with some arm and heads popping off of enemies. When you watch people play this game and you see the combat, you might think that it sucks, but it feels much better when you play it. This time around, you can actually feel the impact of your weapons on enemies' armor or shields, making it a much better experience overall. You can use abilities while in combat, and there's quite a big number of them, so you can create your perfect build. There's also a weak point system where you shoot your enemies' weak points with your bow and their stun bar goes down. If the stun bar goes all the way down, you will be able to perform a big damage stun attack on them, so make sure to take advantage of their weak points. Eivor also has a stamina bar, but I never really noticed since my playstyle is more of a controlled action instead of just spamming the attack and dodge buttons, which will really deplete your stamina bar really quick.
If you just continue to press the same button like X, 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 and Y, 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 and X, X, and Y, Y, Y again, you'll be sucked.
Another welcome addition in this game is the variety of enemies. There's a lot to choose from and all have different abilities and fight in different ways, so fights are never always the same. Honestly, my feedback for the combat would be working on the camera system, balance enemies' damage, and tone down combat abilities. When you get into combat, I feel like the camera just goes way too far away to allow me to see more, but I feel like it breaks my immersion too often, and I never feel like it's a benefit to have it that far away. Also, the combat in this game is just way too easy. Enemies do very little damage to you, if not over your power level of course, which reduces the stakes of combat significantly. Most of the boss fights repeat attack patterns, so I never feel like anything is hard. Bosses and zealots were super easy to fight while on their level, so I think the way enemies behave needs some work. Yeah, the bosses after the patch, it's a level 400 stone bear, yeah. This is literally what I'm doing. Yeah. And finally, maybe on a more personal taste, I generally avoided using the abilities too much as Eivor, because in tandem with the camera, they broke my immersion way too much. Some abilities felt too silly and more like superpowers in a grounded, kinda historical experience. I understand why it's there, and I don't have an issue with them per se, but maybe toning them down just a little bit would have been better. Like I said in my top 5 things to be excited for video, Assassins and social stealth returning to the franchise was one of my favorite things. I've always been very vocal, mostly on my streams, about how they've never should have stayed away from these core elements of the franchise, but I'm glad we're steering back into line in a good way. I have to give it to the Tav team on the social stealth department. I thought it was just going to be some tacked on semi-feature to please some fans, but what we actually got was an evolution of the old system. You can bring up your hood, which makes you harder to spot in distressed areas, but sometimes I felt like guards still noticed you pretty fast even though you weren't doing anything wrong. In these distressed zones there are benches, workstations, people, monks to help you blend into the crowd. Overall, the social stealth system was very cool, and I can't wait to see the evolutions of it to make it better. In regards to overall stealth, I have some mixed feelings. My experience with it was a little bit of a hit or a miss. The stealth remains that kind of bush stealth where you navigate through objects placed high enough to avoid the gaze of guards, or navigate through plants and bushes. It works pretty well for the type of game they built, but I have to commend the team with all of the level design because it opened up a lot of stealth routes and truly made me feel creative on how I approached my stealth. Really great job on that. But there are a few bugs.
What? Hold there, you! What the fuck?
When I first started playing the game, it actually went pretty well. Enemies didn't detect me too fast and I could move through the shadows and complete my objectives in camps and forts, until some bugs started happening. The weirdest one I detected was when regular enemies spread around the world kinda detected you. You know, non-hostile enemies like birds or deers would detect Eivor and the vanishing animation would play out. Here's an example of birds detecting me while doing a world event.
Just scolds, warriors full of mead and story greed. Oh yes, let me weave you a hero's song. We were so young, so very nimble in our hugur and our ways.
This is important because if a bird was close enough while you were trying to stealth around, that means if it does detect Eivor and then an enemy sees you, it merges the two detection buffers, I guess, and immediately triggers the guard's alarm. But you know, bugs happen and the patches that have been happening actually helped with the detection issues I was having. Another feedback note I would probably give is maybe provide players with some more tools like throwing knives given to Eivor by Hytham, or even something simple like throwing rocks as distractions. I always feel a little bit weird having to shoot an actual arrow to the floor in order to distract someone, and having a bit more of a choice would actually be amazing. The assassin bureaus were probably my favorite thing in this game. These spaces left behind by the former hidden ones that were driven out of England by the Order of the Ancients held notes, some detailing conversations, and others containing thoughts and musings about the creed. These were extremely well written, and finding them all was really fun and threw me back to the days in 2007 playing Assassin's Creed 1. I absolutely love the bureaus, so maybe one piece of feedback I would share is maybe giving the Magas Codex pages some voice acting with some specific ambient music. It would make exploring these places a bit more special and a bit more impactful for the player. As a Viking, don't expect to just ride around in England exploring. You need to feed the people at your settlement and improve its buildings. In order to do that, you must get resources and silver, and to get them, Eivor must raid monasteries spread around the riversides of England. Raids in itself are fun and combat-filled events which, in order to complete, you must plunder every chest of resources present in the area. They're very basic in conception, which disappointed me a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. The more complex raids were left to the assaults, usually present in the arcs of the story quests. And my feedback lies right there. Raids could have been more complex with some interactions with NPCs, some sort of variation of a side quest, side objectives, and just generally more engaging. There's also no consequences of raiding a monastery on an ally's territory, which could have been cool, but I understand why it wasn't implemented. This game is very conflicted with the more linear background of the franchise and role-playing games. In order to be a good role-playing experience, games need to tick some boxes. One of these boxes is world activities that players can engage in and immerse themselves in the world with. Origins had the Hippodrome races and Odyssey didn't have anything, which was really bad for a more role-playing leaning game. Yes, I'm not counting the gladiator fights. In Valhalla though, I think the team nailed it with one of the activities they decided to include, Orlog. If you don't know what it is, it's a game where two players duel by rolling dice and invoking god favors. The first player to reduce the health of the opponent to 0 wins. It's Valhalla's version of Gwent per se. The game is fun and interesting to explore, and there are many Orlog players spread around the map, and each victory rewards you with a new god favor to use in the game. I've made 2 videos now talking about Orlog, so if you want to know how to play and where to get every single god favor, links are right in the description. I explored Orlog a lot and I loved it, and I do have some feedback for the team. You could have some sort of difficulty setting, because right now I feel like the AI is very forgiving by not picking optimal dice and sometimes not using powers that would let them win. There could have also been a cool quest where, upon hearing of Eivor's wins around England, a stranger comes to the settlement and invites Eivor to an Orlog tournament, and this triggers a side quest with a lot of Orlog playing and some mystery to uncover. That would have been very cool. But no matter what, Orlog was a bunch of fun, and I'm really happy it was included in the game. At the end of the day, after Orlog and raiding, Eivor needs a place to come back to, the settlement called Ravensthorpe. To me, the settlement was one of the highlights of the game. It functions as your base in England, and it's there that a lot of stuff happens. A lot of the story will flow through it, so you'll be engaging with the settlement frequently. By gathering resources, you can start to build and improve certain buildings with obvious benefits. You can throw feasts in the main hall, giving you and your crew a feast buff when raiding. Some buildings actually improve that feast buff. You can build a shop to buy items, the tattoo shop to customize Eivor's tattoos and hair, the Assassin Bureau for Hytham that upon building triggers one of the most brilliant moments in Assassin's Creed in a very long while, learning the Leap of Faith. People there are friends and can ask Eivor to help them with stuff, which improves your relationship with them. You can also customize a lot of decorations spread around your settlement, and there's a lot to choose from and a lot to find around the world, so feel free to explore that at will. I've always loved having a base to come back to and relax, and I think the team nailed it with Ravensthorpe. I really love this edition. I'm not gonna take a million years detailing every single thing in the story, so I'll summarize where I see fit. The story begins in 873 AD in Norway and follows the life of Eivor. At the start of the game, your older stepbrother Sigurd arrives from a long trip with some friends, 2 hidden ones named Basim and Hytham. They are the ones that are gonna give you your hidden blade and teach you the basics of assassinations. Eivor and their clan are then pressured to leave Norway, and they set their minds to settling new lands in Anglo-Saxon England. Immediately upon arrival, they find allies and enemies, and it's there that the game truly unfolds. Randvi, then Sigurd's wife, has a map of the territory, and she guides you throughout the entire game into which territory you should maybe go next. Each territory is considered an arc, and the story is divided into several of them. I would say there are three major arcs: the hidden ones, the Viking, and the Asgard arcs. This is where this structure gets confusing. I would say while you're playing, the Viking and the hidden one arcs kind of merge together. Those arcs are definitely what I would consider part of a linear story. And then you have some arcs that fit into the Viking story more, that just felt like filler. They're there to try to offer some kind of closure to characters you meet throughout the game and don't necessarily connect to the hidden one storyline, like Soma for example. I didn't necessarily dislike the arc structure, but some arcs felt way too filler for me, and Eivor's story doesn't seem to end. It just stops in its tracks suddenly, and I think we'll need to wait for the DLC to get more of a closure for Eivor. The best arcs, in my opinion, are the London, Jorvik, and Winchester arcs. They function as these old-school Assassin's Creed stories where you must find your targets and kill them. Each target is actually a parallel to a target Altair kills in Assassin's Creed 1. But even though I enjoyed these a lot, it still shows me just how much the Witcher RPG style doesn't fit Assassin's Creed. In Assassin's Creed 1, assassinations were major events. They were linear, but really well polished and made you feel like a badass. In Assassin's Creed Unity, we had black boxes, which allowed you to approach the assassination as you see fit, but in that game you had many assassin tools to do many variations of the kill. In Valhalla though, since stealth takes a step back, these assassinations feel super easy, and if you encounter any sort of bug, well, it can ruin the assassination entirely for you, and you can even repeat it from the top, like in Assassin's Creed 1. Now this right here was what I was waiting for. I'm a dead-hard fan of the franchise, and to me, assassins have been in the background for far too long. What we get here isn't perfect, but in my opinion is of very high quality, and I loved what we got here. I do have some constructive criticism to offer, so stay tuned. Throughout the game you get glimpses of weird behavior in Basim and Sigurd. You're not quite sure what is going on, and they do a very good job in mirroring what you feel as a player and what Eivor feels as your vessel. A feeling of being uneasy and distrusting of them both. A member of the Order of the Ancients called Folke then captures Sigurd and tortures him, all while leaving writings of unleashing something within him. If you do the Asgard visions in Valka's hut, you will be able to connect a few dots on your own, especially since voice actors and faces are the same in Asgard. You eventually find out that Eivor, Basim, and Sigurd are sages for Odin, Loki, and Tyr respectively. You fight with Basim in the Norway Grand Temple of the Isu and imprison him there, escaping with your brother. It's in this section that you see Eivor fighting internally with Odin. Odin wants to take over Eivor's consciousness, but they refuse, and Odin is kept locked away inside. Meanwhile, in the modern day, Layla comes to the temple and sacrifices herself to restabilize it, but accidentally leaving the Staff of Hermes on the ground, which allows Basim, now Loki, to set himself free and recover using the powers of the Isu artifact. We then see Basim interacting with Sean and Rebecca and free to use the Animus as he sees fit. Now this ending, I absolutely loved. It took me back to the old school Assassin's Creed days where the ending was this event that made me glue myself to the screen. Endings were great because they were momentous and left us all in this cliffhanger with more questions than answers, but with enough pieces to make our minds wonder. I feel like Valhalla succeeded in that and offered us a great story with amazing connections, and I can't wait for the DLC to find out what Basim is gonna do with that Animus. But I do have a few things to say about it. The Isu being so closely intertwined with Norse mythology, for example, Odin killing Loki's son, just like in the Norse sagas, kinda turns me off a little bit. Lasers recently worded a Twitter thread that mirrors my thoughts very well. Geared Fox started by saying, "I f***ing miss how the Isu used to be depicted." Minerva outright says,
No, not gods. We simply came before.
and yet the recent AC games have only depicted the Isu as gods. Then Laser starts replying, "Sure, Valhalla never outright shows them as gods, like Odyssey did, if you aren't counting Asgard, but Valhalla's depiction is far from the original games. The cool thing about Isu was that they were this ancient race that became myth and legend. Their lives, achievements and failings turned into fables and religions. The reality was far different. Original Isu weren't ever depicted as Roman gods, and they didn't even really mirror that of Roman legends or stories. You could just see that Roman mythology clearly was inspired by the Isu. Also, the way they combined Roman gods with Christian stories like Adam and Eve together with other belief systems across history made it so much more compelling. To suggest there were just this Norse group of Isu called Odin, Thor, Loki, etc., and for almost the only depiction we get for them to be Norse mythology stories detaches them from reality. Where Minerva felt like a being from an ancient civilization whose life was twisted into human beliefs and religions, Odin feels like a mythical being from a mythical land. I can't see him as anything but that. That brings me to another thing. How in the hell did they get all the sages to surface in people that are so close to each other? It was Eivor, Sigurd, Valka's mother, 3 sages in such close proximity, and what would have happened if Loki's sage appeared only 50 years later, or even Odin's for that matter? Did they see one of the futures to see this happening? And if they did, didn't they see it doesn't end well for them? And you wanna know Eivor's name? Eivor Varen's daughter, so Eivor is a she. Female. So I don't really understand why the game was marketed heavily with a male counterpart, and the male is even featured on the cover. They also said both genders were canon, which, you know, means Eivor is female and Odin is male, so Eivor being a sage for Odin means both genders are canon. Which I really don't interpret it that way. Eivor is Eivor, she's a Norse woman. No matter what Isu is in her head, she's still a woman, so the game should have been marketed correctly. This is a representation issue that has been plaguing the franchise for a long time, and we need to keep fighting for change from Ubisoft. Together with the AC Sisterhood movement, I think we can all eliminate these issues, and if you don't know what the AC Sisterhood is, I'm gonna leave a few links down in the description so you can read up on them, and anyone is welcome to join the movement for a better Assassin's Creed. Overall, those are my gripes with the story, and I just want to say that I came off Valhalla wanting more. I need those DLCs because I'm really interested to see what is gonna happen next, and that's an amazing feeling we Assassin's Creed fans haven't had in a while. There's not too much that I can say about the soundtrack, it's amazing. The team of Jesper Kyd, Sarah Schachner, and Einar Selvik was amazing. They all brought their A game, and it shows in the quality of the final product. The game is way too long. We've had these 100 plus hours of experiences in Origins and Odyssey, but I still think Valhalla's content is more digestible. Both in Origins and Odyssey I had to take breaks because I was getting exhausted of playing them, but in Valhalla I was able to complete everything just a little bit over 90 hours. I think that I was able to breeze through everything because my muscle memory was already tuned to this type of game, and that coupled with the content being more digestible, was able to keep playing and becoming more efficient as time goes by. In the end, I loved the experience, but it still made me want a more compact, linear experience the next time around. I absolutely love Valhalla, and even though it remains in the Witcher-esque RPG style of game, I feel like Assassin's Creed fans will love what we have here and should definitely give it a shot if they haven't yet. I personally want the franchise to return to its roots in the future, but Valhalla turned a scare for the future fan into an excited and hopeful one. I like to say that we've been playing The Witcher 3 for 5 years. I think it's time for the franchise to evolve, but not in the let's improve these gameplay elements. Let's actually move forward and create something that leaves everyone with their shins dropped. Let's bring back assassins, let's go back to playing as assassins, let's go back to Assassin's Creed. Thank you so much for watching. If you never want to miss a beat, make sure to follow me on Twitch and Twitter. Links are in the description below, and I'll see you guys around. Bye!